Nowadays, John Carpenter's 1982 horror movie The Thing is nothing short of iconic and legendary, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, not only did the movie flop due to the success of a more family-friendly alien movie, E.T., both released by Universal and only a few weeks apart, with E.T. releasing first, but John Carpenter almost didn't direct it at all. Tobe Hooper, director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, almost helmed the project, but his rewrites didn't sit well with the studio heads. It was Carpenter's experience and success with the movie Halloween and his unique vision that won him the director's chair. But that was only one piece of what made this movie great. The grotesque body horror and practical effects are what make this movie a standout. Rob Bottin was the primary lead on the effects, and at only 22 years old, he worked day and night, even sleeping on set to save time and money so he could work around the clock. That hard work reportedly hospitalized him mid-production. The legendary Stan Winston stepped in to lend a hand, but he refused to take full credit since Bottin had created nearly everything before falling ill. Winston only added small touches and improved puppets while on set. Critics at the time said The Thing was too bleak and gory to be enjoyable, which just goes to show why nobody should trust critics. The movie was so great, it's still culturally relevant today. In fact, when the 2011 movie with the same title was released, fans went into an uproar that someone had the audacity to recreate a masterpiece horror film, only to be stunned that it wasn't a remake at all, but a faithful prequel. And yes, I'm damn sure going to cover it in the future. But right now, let's talk about 1982's The Thing. Our story starts in Antarctica, a flat, frozen desert where the wind cuts through everything. Snow piles up like waves, and the silence is broken only by the occasional crack of ice. A lone dog races across the snow, fast and panicked, as a helicopter follows close behind it, chasing without mercy. Gunfire cracks through the wind. The dog dodges and zigzags toward a cluster of buildings. This is the American Research Outpost. Inside, Mac is playing a digital game of chess while sipping his drink. The computer quickly wins, defeating him with a quick checkmate. Mac calls the computer a cheating bitch and dumps his glass of whiskey into the circuitry. He hears the helicopter buzzing around the facility and sees the two people aboard tossing grenades and firing shots at a fleeing husky. The helicopter pilot, after landing, pulls the pin on a grenade, but it slips from his grip. This causes an explosion that kills him and destroys the helicopter. The blast knocks the shooter off his feet. The Norwegian man, who we later find out in the prequel is named Lars, stands and begins to let out a panicked rant in Norwegian, frantically warning the group of men that the dog isn't a dog, but rather something pretending to be one, pleading with them to get away from it. Since the men can't understand him, Lars takes aim and fires, trying to kill the dog, but misses and hits Bennings in the leg. The Americans dive for cover, convinced the Norwegian man has lost his mind. Lars marches right past them in swift pursuit of the dog. Commander Gary breaks out a window and fires his revolver, believing Lars is now a threat to their facility. He kills Lars by shooting him in the head, not only ending his life but dooming the fates of everyone at Outpost 31. Mac checks on Bennings and hands him the bottle of whiskey before joining the others to stop the burning wreckage of the helicopter. Dr. Copper patches up Bennings' wound as Dr. Blair and the comm specialist Windows desperately try to make contact with anyone via radio to report what just happened. Their communication attempts, however, seem like a lost cause, as the entire region is obscured in a fierce snowstorm. The men gather together, trying to make sense of the chaos. They decide to check on the nearby Norwegian facility to see if they can find any answers. Commander Gary, Mac, and Dr. Copper board the helicopter and leave for the Norwegian site. Meanwhile, back in the recreation room, the camera lingers on the motionless husky, lying underneath a pool table. Night has fallen, and Bennings struggles to get Knowles to turn down the radio. We see the would-be husky enter a room and interact with someone whose identity is obscured by shadow. This entire movie is basically one big game of
spot the imposter. Upon multiple viewings, it's easy to point out who is infected and how events unfolded, but the cast was purposefully kept in the dark until certain points. This brought out more intense and realistic tension during those building moments. In the movie, the man in shadow is meant to be Palmer, but this wasn't actor David Clennon, since his silhouette was too distinct. Instead, stunt coordinator Dick Warlock was used as a stand-in. This not only kept the audience in suspense, but ensured the actors themselves didn't even know who was and wasn't infected until the reveal scene was shot. It was clever, and part of the reason the acting feels so genuine, because most of the time it was.
Meanwhile, Mac, flying toward the Norwegian base, notices plumes of black smoke drifting through the sky. He and the others land and enter the burned-out facility, calling out for any possible survivors. Mac mistakenly refers to them as Swedish, and Dr. Copper repeatedly corrects him, saying, "Norwegian, not Swedish." The hallway is frigid and ominous, its walls charred and the floor covered in ice and ash. Every sound is amplified, the crunch of broken glass, the creak of wood, the scrape of boots on ice. They come to a door with an axe lodged in it. Cautiously they open it. Inside, the room is dark and frozen over. Copper finds a trail of blood leading to a man slumped in a chair. He is horrified by the sight. Copper sees scattered papers crumpled and disorganized on the ground. Copper insists they should take the notes, believing there may be something important to translate later. MacReady then finds a large block of ice, cracked and broken, as if something had erupted from inside it. MacReady shudders at the thought. Copper speculates they might have removed something from the ice. MacReady asks the chilling question, if that's the case, where is it? Outside, they find empty kerosene canisters and the charred remains of something unrecognizable, burned in a hurry. Unsure if it was human, they bring the remains back to Outpost 31 by helicopter. From the window, the Husky watches them return. They unwrap the twisted carcass, and Dr. Blair nearly vomits at the sight. A mangled mess of limbs and faces, something that tried to form into humanity but failed to complete its transformation. Commander Gary orders Blair to perform an autopsy immediately. MacReady studies everyone's reactions rather than the thing itself. The Husky strangely does the same. Later, Commander Gary finds Windows asleep at the comms station. He wakes him, insisting he stay on it. They need to reach someone, anyone. Back in the medical lab, Copper examines one of the Norwegians and concludes there's nothing unusual in his system. No alcohol, no drugs. Meanwhile, Blair continues to examine the twisted remains. Strangely, the internal organs appear perfectly normal. It's only the exterior that is grotesquely warped. Later that night, while the men try to relax but remain on edge, the Husky nudges Bennings' injured leg. Startled, Bennings demands Clark put the Husky in the kennel. Clark obliges, but as he opens the door, the dog seems reluctant, hesitant, almost calculating. Clark notices something off about it. It's larger than the others and acting strangely. Shrugging it off as nerves, he closes the door and shuts off the light. Inside the kennel, the Husky begins breathing heavily, its body tensing unnaturally. The other dogs bark and growl aggressively. Then, the transformation begins. Bones crack, skin splits, flesh stretches into grotesque new limbs, faces, and eyes. The metamorphosis is fast, violent, and horrifying. The other dogs shift from aggression to terror, clawing at the cage and barking frantically, desperate to escape. The dog thing begins assimilating them, one after another. Clark returns, trying to see what the noise is about, but the kennel light won't turn on. He opens the door and two Huskies burst past him, knocking him over. He glances back just in time to see tentacles writhing through the opening, but he slams the kennel door shut and locks it. Hearing the yelps and howls of the dogs, MacReady assumes there's an emergency and pulls the fire alarm. MacReady rushes to the kennel, where Clark tells him he doesn't know what's inside, but it's big and pissed off. MacReady orders Bennings to get Childs and the flamethrower. When the crew shines their flashlights into the cage, they recoil at the grotesque horror inside. MacReady and Commander Gary open fire, but the creature seems largely unfazed. It splits off into a second organism, which escapes through the roof. Childs enters with the flamethrower, and MacReady yells at him to burn it. Childs freezes in fear and is nearly attacked before he finally pulls the trigger, incinerating the creature. In the aftermath, Dr. Blair studies the remains. His face is pale as he realizes the organism can imitate perfectly, down to the smallest detail. While tending to the surviving dogs, Blair begins to show signs of paranoia. He questions Clark about how long the husky had been wandering around camp before being put in the kennel, and more importantly, how much time Clark had been alone with it. While going through the Norwegians' notes and video logs, the crew discovers that they had been investigating a particular location near their outpost. MacReady decides they should check it out. Norris, Palmer, and MacReady fly to the site, discovering a massive alien craft buried in the ice. They estimate it has been there for about 100,000 years. Palmer then discovers the excavation pit, where the Norwegians unearthed the block of ice that contained the creature. Back at Outpost 31, the crew pieces everything together. They assume the craft crashed long ago, and the creature either escaped or crawled out before succumbing to the cold, becoming entombed in ice. The Norwegians must have found and thawed it. As they argue, tensions rise until Knowles tosses a soiled shirt onto the table and complains about people discarding their dirty clothes in his kitchen. Blair's paranoia deepens after he runs a simulation with the alien cells, seeing how quickly they replicate. He reruns the program using human DNA. The computer estimates a 75% chance that someone at the outpost is already infected. A third simulation shows that if the organism reaches a major population center, the entire world could be infected in just over 3 years. But if COVID is any kind of benchmark, it would probably spread even faster. And a mask sure as hell ain't helping Karens this time. You ain't calling the manager over to ask that the people at the next table stop assimilating each other. I wonder what that would look like.
Hey, guess what we're doing over here?
Fuchs pulls MacReady aside, warning him that Blair is acting strangely. Blair has locked himself in his room and refuses to come out. Fuchs reveals he found disturbing notes. The organism can mimic humans perfectly, but requires prolonged isolation with a host to fully assimilate them. Even more unsettling, Blair's notes indicate that the burned remains still show cellular activity, meaning they're not truly dead, and that someone among them has likely already been infected. Windows then bursts out into the cold, panicked. He tells them one of the twisted remains is actively attacking Bennings. All three of them rush back inside, but by the time they arrive, both Bennings and the creature are gone. Outside, they spot the assimilated Bennings stumbling through the snow, with only his hands still deformed. MacReady lights a flare as the creature lets out a deep, bone-shaking scream that echoes through the darkness. MacReady kicks over a drum of fuel and torches the creature. Commander Gary, shaken, asks how the creature could look so human, but MacReady doesn't let him finish. He grabs a flamethrower and says they need to burn everything. Every single piece of the remains they brought back. Every trace of the creature. The crew hauls the carcasses into a pit outside and douses them in gasoline, burning them. Everyone is present, except Blair. MacReady later spots Blair running in the darkness. He soon discovers that Blair has sabotaged the helicopter. Moments later, a gunshot echoes through the outpost. MacReady rushes back to find Blair going berserk.
A big part of the reason this movie is so good is because of the actors in it, and Wilford Brimley's surely one of them. He reportedly went extremely method for his role as Dr. Blair. During scenes that used actual animal organs, Brimley was reportedly the only actor on set not to wince when viewing, smelling, or handling the goopy mess. And during his scenes when his character was going insane and smashing equipment, Brimley would do things to keep his fellow actors genuinely on edge, to the point they wondered if he was really losing it. For example, when John Carpenter asked how Brimley felt about a scene, he would purposely respond with unrelated answers like, "I'm picking up my laundry," just to throw people off and keep them unsettled. He even isolated himself from the rest of the cast once his character was confined to the shed. The funny thing is, when Brimley was asked years later what he thought of the film, he said it was gory and needlessly violent for his taste. Saying Brimley kept it strictly method is an understatement. But he wasn't the only cast member to put everyone on edge. The dog actor, Jed, was considered one of the best animal performers ever. He was so eerily calm and silent that the crew said he sometimes seemed more like an actual alien than a dog. Carpenter had the camera linger on him, just staring, and it creeped everyone out. It was almost like Jed knew he was playing an alien that was pretending to be a dog.
Swinging an axe at the communications equipment and ranting that no one can be allowed to leave or call for help, he threatens to kill anyone who approaches. It takes nearly the entire crew to subdue him. They finally knock him out and lock Blair inside the tool shed. Before they close the door, MacReady has a brief moment alone with him. Blair mutters one last warning: watch Clark. The paranoia spreads like wildfire. Childs asks MacReady an impossible question. If this thing can perfectly replicate humans, how will they ever know who's infected? They discuss needing a test while MacReady silently passes along Blair's warning about Clark. Suspicion grows when they discover the blood supply, meant to be used for testing, has been sabotaged. Arguments erupt over who had access, with fingers pointing at both Copper and Commander Gary. In a panic, Windows bolts into the weapons locker and tries to arm himself with a shotgun, but Gary corners him at gunpoint. MacReady diffuses the standoff, convincing Windows to drop the weapon. Shaken, Commander Gary steps down from command, surrenders his gun, and requests Norris to take charge. Norris refuses due to not feeling up to it. Childs makes a move for the gun, but Clark pulls a knife to stop him. MacReady intervenes, taking the weapon, saying it should belong to someone more steady and even-tempered. He glares at Clark, who reluctantly hands over his knife. Distrust now poisons every interaction, as it's clear any of them could be the creature hiding in plain sight, causing everyone to become increasingly paranoid. MacReady orders Gary, Copper, and Clark to be tied up as a precaution. Soon, Fuchs goes missing as MacReady leads the search and uncovers what appear to be his burned remains. MacReady assumes Fuchs took himself out to prevent assimilation, and sends Windows back to inform the others. Knowles and MacReady then head to MacReady's cabin and notice a light on inside, even though MacReady swears he turned everything off earlier. A long time passes and neither of them returns. Childs orders the doors barricaded. Knowles eventually comes back, claiming he cut MacReady loose from a guideline after finding a torn piece of clothing with his name on it. He suggests MacReady was trying to hide evidence by burning it. When MacReady tries to re-enter the outpost, the others refuse to let him in. He smashes a window, slipping into the storage room, then threatens to blow everyone sky high with a bundle of dynamite if they don't back off. Convinced MacReady is the creature, Knowles and Norris attempt to overpower him. MacReady throws them off, but in the struggle, Norris collapses, suddenly unable to breathe. MacReady orders them to untie Dr. Copper so he can help. Clark quietly grabs and hides a scalpel while Copper begins jolting Norris with a defibrillator. He shocks Norris once, but there's no response. He tries again, but Norris's torso suddenly splits open, jagged teeth snapping shut and biting off Copper's arms. As everyone rushes from the room, MacReady ignites the twitching body of the deforming fake Norris, but its head detaches from the body, sprouts spider-like legs, and runs away. Palmer notices the spider head and MacReady burns it. Now, with the most recent events, everyone is on edge and distrustful, more so than ever. MacReady gathers everyone and tells them that he has a way to test who is and isn't infected. Childs says he won't allow MacReady to tie him up. Clark lunges at MacReady with the scalpel and is now able to breathe through his forehead for his actions. MacReady comes up with the idea, from watching Norris, that the thing isn't one big creature, but that every part and piece is its own separate organism, and that it will react if burned to try and save itself. So, he orders that everyone give a blood sample, stupidly with the same scalpel, without disinfecting it in between. He starts with Windows' blood, sticking the hot copper wire in. Only a hiss of steam. Windows breathes a sigh of relief. He orders Windows to put on the other flamethrower and to watch the others. He heats up the copper wire again, sticking it into his own sample. Again, just steam. Child says this test is a crock of shit. He then tests Doc Copper and Clark's blood, and again, just steam. Child says if his test is correct, then he's a murderer for killing Clark. MacReady picks up Palmer's blood sample. Commander Gary says this test is nonsense. MacReady, still distrustful, says the only other person with the key to the blood bag storage was Gary, telling him he'll save his test for last. But when he sticks the hot copper wire into Palmer's blood sample, it jets from the tray. It begins swirling and wiggling on the floor as Palmer begins to convulse in his chair. Everyone panics and pulls against their restraints as Not Palmer rips himself free and MacReady's flamethrower malfunctions.
This was another scene where details were kept from the actors until the reveal. When Kurt Russell is holding the blood tray in his hand and poking the copper wire in, it was actually a prosthetic arm. The scene was shot multiple times, with the name on the tray purposefully obscured. When the blood actually reacts to the hot wire, Russell's jump was reportedly partly real. Carpenter wanted a legitimate reaction. That sold the iconic scene even more. Moments before, you can actually see David Clennon acting naturally, with boredom and exhaustion, after shooting the scene so many times, not knowing his character was the one infected.
MacReady screams at Windows to blast him, but Windows is frozen in fear. Not Palmer attacks Windows swiftly and brutally. MacReady gets his flamethrower to work just in time to ignite Not Palmer, who bursts through the wall and crumples into a flaming heap outside. MacReady, not satisfied with leaving it to burn, tosses a stick of dynamite at the creature, blowing it into a million pieces. MacReady returns inside only to see Windows has already begun to transform. He burns him without a second thought, then continues testing. Knowles, Childs, and Commander Gary all pass as uninfected. With everyone inside proven human, MacReady, Knowles, and Gary go to test Doc Blair, leaving Childs behind to guard the outpost. The trio goes to the tool shed, only to find it empty. They discover loose floorboards, and underneath, they find that Doc was infected and trying to build a craft to escape. Knowles sees Childs running outside, only for the power to go out soon after, adding to the tension. The storm outside has intensified, the wind howling. Without power, the station grows colder by the hour. The survivors, huddled in layers of clothing, discuss their dwindling options. MacReady suggests total destruction of the station. If the thing escapes and makes it to the mainland, it will infect the world. They begin throwing explosives and firebombs, strategically destroying each room of the facility, giving the thing no place to hide. After destroying the above-ground facility, they are left with the option of setting charges to bury the entire area under tons of ice as insurance. They place charges in specific places, each placement a potential salvation or doom. Every shadow seems to move of its own volition. Every distant howl in the storm feels like the creature itself, waiting, calculating. During preparations, the thing strikes again. Gary, moving to check a fuse, is attacked in the shadows by a partially assimilated Blair thing. The attack is sudden and brutal, leaving Gary dead almost instantly. Knowles notices a body being dragged and goes to investigate, only to disappear, assumed to have been killed off-screen, leaving MacReady alone to finish the final preparations. When he notices both Knowles and Gary are gone, he lights the wick on some dynamite, assuming he'll be killed next. The grotesque alien erupts from the floor, snarling and growling at MacReady, who throws the lit dynamite and runs for his life out of the caverns. The single stick of dynamite starts a chain reaction, blowing all the underground charges. Fireballs light up the dark night sky, as one building after another explodes into a glowing ball of fire. MacReady stumbles through the burning remains, finally collapsing from exhaustion. Just as he's about to take a drink from the bottle, Childs appears behind him, asking if he killed the monster. MacReady asks where Childs was, and Childs says he chased Blair out into the storm and got lost. The two men are naturally distrusting of each other, but both are too exhausted to fight. When Childs asks what they should do, MacReady says if either of them has a surprise for the other, there's not much either of them can do about it. So MacReady elects that they just sit and wait for a while. Handing Childs the bottle, the two sit as the outpost burns around them, and the screen fades to black.
And here we are at the ending. Like everyone else, I've had theories, and yes, mine have changed multiple times over the years. I used to argue to the death that Childs was infected, that they filled all the bottles with gasoline when they firebombed the base, and the music sting when Childs takes a swig from the bottle and MacReady grimly laughs was because he outed the final imposter. But that isn't the case. If you notice, this is the same bottle of whiskey MacReady has been drinking throughout the entire movie. The same bottle he hands to Bennings after he got shot in the leg, and the same bottle MacReady himself was about to drink from before Childs popped up. Also, the thing sheds anything artificial, clothing included. But Childs still has his earring. The ending was left ambiguous on purpose so people could basically choose their own adventure. Realistically, if anything, they both might be infected but haven't succumbed yet. For MacReady, he's been drinking from the bottle he gave Bennings, after Bennings was shot and licked by the infected husky, meaning organisms from the dog's saliva could have already infected Bennings, who drank from the bottle, and then MacReady took it back and continued drinking from it himself. And in the end, Childs also takes a drink from that same bottle. If that's not the case, then remember, everyone shared the same scalpel during the blood test. Windows took each sample, and his idea of disinfecting was just wiping the blade on his pants. Sure, it looks like Knowles had alcohol swabbed on his skin, but that makes zero difference if they all use the same blade. Realistically, everyone tested after Palmer could have been infected. But thankfully, we actually do have a canon answer to the big question of who was and wasn't infected. The 2002 video game The Thing is considered a canon sequel to the 1982 film, a status endorsed by John Carpenter himself. In it, Childs wasn't infected. He's found frozen with an empty bottle of whiskey next to his corpse. But MacReady isn't at the scene, though he isn't infected either. The game doesn't explicitly explain how he survived after the events of the movie, but it implies he was captured by the biotech company Gen Inc. He eventually escaped and stole one of their helicopters, which he uses in the final scene to help the player character Captain Blake exterminate the final boss before flying off into the darkness. And since you should watch both the prequel and original before watching this video, I'll touch on Kate Lloyd's fate as well. She was the sole survivor of the Norwegian Outpost incident, and according to screenwriter Eric Heiserer, in his original script, Kate's death was definite. But it was changed in the final cut into a wounded cowboy riding off into the sunset ending, so it wouldn't be quite as bleak. As far as the writer is concerned, though, she didn't survive. But who knows? Since it didn't happen on screen, and most people haven't played the video game, shame on you if you didn't, a third movie could still be made, if Mary Elizabeth Winstead wanted to return as Kate Lloyd. But anyway, that's all I've got for this video. I want to give a special thank you to our channel members, and I also want to thank you all for watching, commenting, and suggesting which movies you'd like me to cover next. Take care, have a great week, and we'll see you in the next one.